Sangye Druparsho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo yalhaye ke da ludan jinke drubundandami kenamdan druwagunge dranam chitsampa tamje ke du dagi chöten to tamje ke du dagi chöten. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Volevo cominciare oggi
I'd like to begin today
con un concetto per me
with
molto importante,
a concept that is very important to me,
introducendo questo con un aneddoto.
introducing this with an anecdote that I lived myself many, many years ago. We were in Indonesia, in Borobudur, this marvelous place, and it was maybe about 15 years, for 15 years, Lama used to go every year, and now they've actually closed the hotel where we used to go. Things have changed a lot, but one day we'll go back. Anyway, so we were there in this beautiful hotel, and we were having breakfast. And certainly those of you who have been there, you'll remember this restaurant that has this open roof, this kind of terraced restaurant, and they used to love to make pancakes, and they would make these crepes, these pancakes with banana, honey. There are different kinds of pancakes you could have, but there was something particular about this. The, the the kitchen was open pretty much all day, but you never knew who was actually in the kitchen. So if you asked for a pancake and you had the right cook, you had a good pancake. If you asked for pancakes at and maybe at the time where the cook wasn't there, they would take anybody to make the pancake, and the most horrible things would come out. So you never knew what you were going to get. And how many times did it happen that you were eating? You see someone eating a really good pancake, and someone sits down and says, "Oh, I want one of those too." Orders 3 minutes later, and then and get something horrible, and then someone else comes and they order pancakes and something delicious would come. So you had no idea what you would get. And the crazy thing is that you would go to the people and say, Look, people be upset saying, what is this? What did you order? And they look at you like, and so what's wrong? What's the problem? They weren't able to understand. The people there in Indonesia, in their culture, they really show calm and kindness. I don't have. I never saw people there, locals, angry or upset, and there were many, let's say, opportunities given the situations that the tourists um, given. You would see that, like foreigners, those there, they would lose their balance because of a pancake. Um, and they would say, like, oh, this is horrible, bring me another one. And they bring you one just as bad, But they never lost their calm. And one day there was this teaching. And the expression I used during those teachings was, everyone needs to accept his own pancake. So what generates malaise, aversion, and suffering is not the pancake in and of itself, but it's this one of the greatest attachments that we have, if not the greatest attachment that we have. And it's not the pancakes. It's our attachment to reality, according the way that we think it should be. Because if I order a pancake, I have an expectation. And so what arrives it has to correspond to what I ordered, what I expected. But I didn't put into this equation that maybe the cook isn't there, that maybe they're understaffed, or I don't put in all the elements. So I have my idealized image of what it should be. And when I'm in front of the pancake that I was not expecting, what are the choices that I have? I can get upset. I can get nervous. And, if you can, you can get mad and keep asking them again and again to make the pancake again until the good cook comes. Or you can laugh it off, eat that, or if you really don't like it, set it aside, don't eat it. But what does it mean to accept? To accept doesn't mean that you have to suffer, it means that you put energy in the solution instead of staying trapped in the problem. And in most of the in most circumstances, in most instances, because we, as we said yesterday, we are incredibly lucky. We're incredibly fortunate. So we're upset often, most of the time, because reality, the pancake, or because somebody acted in a certain way, because it doesn't correspond to what, in our opinion, it should have been or should be. You are not the way I expected. This situation is not what I expected. I programmed things to be like this, and instead it's like that. So a great part of our suffering, our anger, our aversion, our resentment, our conflicts, tensions, are born often, very, very often, from the fact that we're not able to let go of the fact that reality doesn't correspond to what our idealized image was within our own perspectives. We see only a small part, and so a small part of the whole, and it's our idealized image seeing only that small part. And For example, if you go to a restaurant and you ask for a dish and something different comes. I remember another example many years ago. I was living more in Milan at the time. I went to the supermarket, and there were these supermarket feedity points, and then you could choose something. So I chose something, and it was an electric tool for screwdriver, because when you get something with these points, it feels like you get something for free, So I opened it up, I got it, and I opened it up, and it was, I mean, I expected it to be electric actually, but it wasn't, and my feeling was, oh, they cheated me. They really tricked me here. I thought it was an electric screwdriver, but it was never written that it was electric. But I saw the image, and then I imagined something that just didn't correspond to what it was. But instead of saying, instead of laughing at myself and saying, "Oh, look what I did," that I imagined something that doesn't match reality. I must have seen it badly. Whose fault was it? The supermarkets. So I say, oh, look here, they make this false advertising. And then I stopped and I said, wait, no, hold on. I have to stop victimizing myself here. I'm the one who projected something onto this product that qualities that it just doesn't have. Like we said yesterday, if someone comes to us and say, you shouldn't be like this, what would our answer be? If I'm like this, it's because I can be like this. If you said it would be better if you weren't, then okay, maybe we have something to talk about. Or this situation can't be like this. Well, if it is, then it can. I mean, it can means that the causes and conditions in this present moment allow for it to be like that. The more important question is not if something can or can't be in a certain way, but what is the best way to interact with that situation so that it can transform in the direction that we think is the best. I don't know if that is clear. A little bit like, let's imagine that each one of us, that we choose a number. And together with the number that you choose, you need to decide if you want to add, if you want to subtract, if you want to divide or multiply. And so we create this very complicated equation together, and we get to a result. Let's say that our result is 54. And I say, oh, I don't like the number 54. Who is to blame? Who is it? Who chose the wrong number? If you had chosen a different number, we wouldn't have 54 as the result. So who's to blame? I can say to everyone, I could tell everyone present if you had chosen a different number. So who's to blame? The so-called one to blame? Everyone and no one. And if I redo my calculation another 30 times, I'll get to 54. But let's say I really, really don't like this result. It's useless that I say, oh, it shouldn't be 54. How did we get to 54? 54 is horrible. It should have been at least 108. Someone forgot to multiply by two. No, who's the blame? And then if I find someone. If I find someone to blame, I feel even better. And if I can even punish them, then I can release all this tension that I have. And then we have this strange idea that we need to let it out. Why? Because I don't like the number 54, that I need to let it out on someone else and release all this tension. But the whole point, I mean, after all of this, what number do we have? 54. After all that, but it's not, 54 is not a bad number, but it's not what I was expecting. But let's say I really don't want 54. What does it mean, accepting the result? I don't complain about it. I see the negative or good aspects that are present. I try to see the situation clearly. I need 108, and we're only halfway there. Okay, so what can I do now? I need to multiply by 2. I need to add another 54. What do I need to do to get to 104? Then I need to work to go towards that direction, to go in that direction. So accepting doesn't mean to suffer for something. To accept means to put energy into something. Means stopping to victimize ourselves. We put energy in the solution and not in the problem. So to accept well, we need awareness, and this form of humbleness in front when faced with reality. This humility, humbleness. Let's imagine for a moment, let's imagine our present situation or a specific situation. Have you ever asked yourselves why? Why are you in this situation, or why are you living this particular situation? Ask yourself, why did this happen? Sometimes people come, Lama, why is this happening to me? And with all sincerity, my answer is I have no idea. If you want an answer, and if you want an answer to be comforted, I can look for someone to blame, because sometimes sometimes if things make sense, we can relax a little bit. But actually, why do things happen? Why are we all here now? How many things had to happen for us to be here present? And what's interesting, if we think of all these small things, the choices made, things said, these small things that we've done, that others have done, that without those small actions, this moment couldn't exist as it does. I don't know. How many small things in the past have happened that have contributed to this moment? An infinite. But when we ask ourselves why like this, why like that, the answer is because there's an infinite number of causes and conditions that interact among them to result in this present moment. But the real question isn't why did this happen? The real question is, how can I interact to go towards the direction that I desire?
Chiaro?
Is that clear? So in our life, when things happen that we don't like in our life or in our collective life, or in society, at work, whatever it is, first of all, it's inevitable that we encounter difficult situations. I don't know anyone who hasn't had difficulties, but our ability to see a difficult situation, breathe, have the humbleness to say, reality is like this because causes and conditions have brought it to be so. So humbleness means to not have the expectation that reality has to correspond to what we think it should be. But having this expectation is quite arrogant, isn't it? we can it's really arrogant. No, things have to be like this. It should be like this. Why? Do you know all the variables? Are you aware of all the variables? No. And so
Perciò questo atto di
this
umiltà
act of humbleness in front of this resistance to reality, a little bit like
in alcune tradizioni
in some traditions, we say, why is this like this? Some answer because God wanted. In some cultures, the answer would be because God wanted it. Um, so, if there's no other clear answer, in Buddhism, we say because causes and conditions have um, have made it possible, have brought it to be as so. But it shows that there's just, I mean, the point is there's an infinite number of variables that interact, and at a certain point, um, the present reality, that situation manifests. And what I do is part of the variables that are the variables that are part of what I'm going to experience at present and in the near future, and in my future in the far away future. So what is anger, for example? Very often anger manifests, I mean, this feeling to want to eliminate, to move far away, to destroy, to annihilate what we recognize as the cause of our suffering. So our object of anger, towards which the object to which we direct this aggression, violence, anger, hatred, is something that we recognize, as what is causing us suffering. And it could be an object, it can be a person, it can be a situation. Have you ever gotten angry at an object? Have you ever seen someone trip over a rock and then get angry at the rock? They were strange. I saw someone get angry because they hit their finger on a desk and then get mad at the desk. You can get angry with yourself. But we recognize that there's something is the reason for the cause of our suffering. And I don't want to suffer. Naturally, we have aversion to suffering. And if I recognize that that is the cause of my suffering, what do I want to do towards that cause of my suffering? I want to stop it. I want to eliminate it. So we have this aversion against it. Given that one of the greatest attachments that we have is that we want that reality needs to correspond to what we think it should be, when they don't, we live this as a cause of our suffering, don't we? And so what do? We generate towards that fact that reality itself doesn't correspond to our expectation, to that idealized image. What do we feel towards that situation? We feel aversion. This aversion can be generalized to the situation, or we have the tendency to really look for someone to blame, something to blame, the culprit. So let's go to today's verse. It says, overcome all anger and conceit and adopt an attitude of humility. Overcome all anger and conceit. Very often, anger, this aggression, this violence, is the fruit of arrogance. I remember once someone who acted with aggression towards someone else. Actually, there were 3 people. There's a verbal aggression because these people were eating a white bread, kind of industrial industrial bread, this white bread. It's obviously not healthy. I agree. So there were these people that were eating this kind of white industrial bread. They were happy and they were joyous that they were eating this bread. Happy. This other person walked by who was not a family member, it was a friend, it was an acquaintance, saw that they were eating that kind of bread and got so angry with them. That's so bad for you. You shouldn't eat these things. What do you, I mean, really just threw everything on top of them. I saw this situation. I said, how much, look at all that arrogance. And it's interesting because that act of aggression, which is harmful, doesn't come from a feeling of wanting to harm those people or having aversion to those people. It comes from this idea that those people were not acting the way they should be acting. No, you shouldn't be like this. The fact that you are, and then you shouldn't be like that, this generates like non-acceptance, and I generate aversion because actually deep inside I love you. But this is an aggression that very often there are people that have this habit of getting angry or being showing this kind of aversion because they're unable to face a reality that is different from what they expect. Oh, this shouldn't be like this, and this person shouldn't think like that, etc., etc. Or even you can be in front of someone who thinks in a different way. Have you ever seen someone be aggressive or this feeling of aversion towards someone who has a different view, different worldview, like politics, for example? It happens, doesn't it? So violence, aggression, violence comes within from this aversion. And how can we face it? We need to develop humbleness. In this context, humility, it means that we should not expect to be the owners of the truth and impose on others how things should be. If you are like this, because causes and conditions in your life have brought you to be like this, I see just one aspect. I don't see the reality that is 100% coherent either. I see only a small part. But humility also says, I can do what I can. I will try how I can better the situation without putting myself in opposition. So, the more we're able to accept things, the less we will suffer. Let's remember that accepting doesn't mean being passive. Accepting means I put energy in the solution. And I remember that day in Borobudur that I talked about at the beginning. At the end, there was a moment for teachings, and I spoke for a long time about acceptance, using the analogy of accepting one's own pancake. And then at the end, someone asked me something that was kind of the summary of everything. The person didn't understand well or accepted and didn't want to accept what I said. But actually, the summary, this question was the opposite of what I was saying. The person said, if I need to accept everything that happens to me, and yes, we need to accept everything that happens. So the question is, if I need to accept everything that happens to me, that means that if I'm in the middle of the street and a car is coming in my direction, it's going to hit me, I need to stay there and get hit by the car. And I said, no, exactly the opposite. If I'm in the middle of the road and I see that there's a car coming and it's going to hit me, what does accepting means? That don't, I'm not there to talk about why the car went through a red light, or say, oh, if I hadn't come to run these errands, I wouldn't be in the middle of the road right now. Or who is that person driving? And let me, so that I can remember the kind of car, who's that person? What do I know? No, I'm in the middle of the road. The car is coming towards me and can hit me. What does accepting mean? How can I protect myself? Where do I jump? I look towards the solution. The antique example was, if you receive an arrow, it's not, if you get hit by an arrow, it's not the moment to talk about the material of the arrow, or who who was behind throwing this arrow, or why was I hit, etc. No, it's you need to take the arrow out. Go find someone who can help you. Go to the hospital, whatever it is. You need to resolve the problem. Oh, just one more story, and then we close this, and we can go on. But this is a personal experience that taught me a lot. Here at the temple, you see all these mandalas, right, on the ceiling. When they're made of cloth, it's called textensel, and they're printed on, and they're backlit. And when I asked, and the company said, how can we do this round like this? Also Borobudur in the center, but normally they're square. But I said, what if we make a tube, like the ones for the shower curtain? So I said, okay, but when I put it up, how can I make sure that it's attached to the ceiling? And I thought, okay, if you turn it like 3 or 4 centimeters, it'll come down a bit, and then you push back up, and it click. And so I was trying to design this idea, and I thought, to be able to place these mandalas, we needed a specific kind of hook, a specific kind of screw. And so I spoke to Silvano. We became good friends. He's the one who made all of these structures in aluminum, etc. So I ordered before. Because Trisha Rinpoche was coming. It was the inauguration of these mandalas. We had a deadline, so I really counted the days to take away the scaffolding, to clean, etc. So I organized everything, knowing that I needed that specific type of screw, and actually needed a tool to use this this kind of screw. And so we ordered, and then I was supposed to put these up. I went to take them, and someone helped me, and I put them up myself. And then I wanted to put them up, and then they told me that they sent the wrong ones when I went to go get them. I said, no. I said, yeah. The first thing I said was, okay, let's try. Maybe, I had imagined that we needed only this other model, but maybe these work too. So I put the first ones up, and so out of 10 of these screws, 8 didn't work. So at that point, I called the supplier, and he said, I can give you the right ones next week, in 10 days. But no, I didn't have that time. I said, I need to have finished the work the day after tomorrow, by the day after tomorrow. So what did I do? I took all, I found the suppliers, and they all told me 1 week, 1 week. So I said, well, I'll go to the source, the actual factory in Switzerland. Luckily, it was only 8 hours a drive. I called the factory, and then I called the factory. They had it, but they said no. But we can only sell to Swiss companies. I said, I know Swiss people. He'll come. A friend will come. So we drove 8 hours there, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, I was there in front of the factory, and of course they're looking at me very strangely. In the end, they gave me they just gave them to me for free, two boxes of screws, and with the little tool to put them up. Another 8 hours, and I was back, and within my program, and the mandalas are still up. And it was joyous to say, okay, I need to connect with the solution. Useless to say, but I ordered them in time, and these are not the right ones, and you knew and you didn't do your part, and who's to blame? Now I'm going to, who's going to pay for this? I mean, I would have lost energy and time. So there's a problem. Let's go towards the solution. This is an example of accepting without any kind of resentment. Because who am I to say what should have happened if those screws didn't arrive at that time? It means that the causes and conditions weren't there for that to happen. And this experience taught me so much. Also, for Silvana was a huge example, something to learn. I mean, we had this problem, we accepted it, and we found a solution. And in our lifetime, so many things like this happen. So, to overcome anger, first of all, we need to develop humility. There are two types of humility. To not have the need to compare oneself, to see oneself, and to not put oneself in a position of superiority. And also here, humility is about not being attached to how we think things should be. Having this expectation to thinking that you know how everything should be is really quite is quite arrogant. Because when we look around, there are things we don't like. In other words, there are many situations in the world. It's a small world around us, and also on a wider scale around on the planet. There are many things that I'm sure we think would be better if they were different. Many, many. But my point is, what can I do to be part of the solution? Because I would like it to be different, but if there's a war, it's because the causes and conditions have created it to be so, and it's up to us, every person who is part of this planet, part of this society, to make sure that there isn't war. But if it's there, then it can only be like that in front of these causes and conditions. When we're able to accept, and I repeat, it's not about Accepting is not putting ourselves in opposition, but instead we put energy into what we would like, what we desire. And it's a beautiful attitude to not be in tension, in conflict, in opposition with the present and also the past. But at the same time, we put our energy towards the future that we want. When we think about ourselves, for example, there are aspects of ourselves that we think would be better if they were different. Obviously, yes. But when we see this, we shouldn't put ourselves in opposition against ourselves. We should accept what we are and direct ourselves towards what we want to be. When we find ourselves in front of someone who acts in a way that we don't like, it's useless to go against and say, you shouldn't be like this. No, I accept you for what you are. I choose how I want to interact with you according to my own abilities, and I see how I can interact with you to better the situation. So here, where it says to overcome all anger and conceit and be humble, we shouldn't put ourselves in opposition to our present or past, but instead direct ourselves with determination towards our future. What happens often is we put ourselves in opposition to our present and past, and we don't have a vision of the future, and we're there victimizing ourselves. I think that it's quite clear. Very often, this object of victimization, of arrogance, is another person, how someone should act, because my father, my mother, my husband, my wife, my child, my son. I don't know if you've ever said this. Oh, because my father, he's not a good father. My mother's not affectionate. My mother is too clingy. Have you ever said something similar or thought something like this? If your father or your mother is, and you can finish the sentence, each one has his own ideas, because causes and conditions in their lives have brought them to be like that. And then also what one sees is also part of one's own movie, no? So the question is not that they shouldn't be in this way. The question is what's the best way that I can interact in front of what is? And it's the basis of loving someone else, allowing ourselves to see and accept someone else. It doesn't mean that you're horrible and you're just going to keep on being horrible. No, okay. There's an attitude that I don't think is right, and I need to accept also that, but accept also that I don't have the job or the ability to change others. I have instead I have the job of interacting in a virtuous way to be part of the solution. And this isn't just about great world, the problems of the world. No, this has to do also with the problems of the people who are by our side. I think it's quite clear, isn't it? So going on, it says, renounce unethical forms of livelihood and sustain yourself according to the Dharma. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are 5 wrong livelihoods for monks and also for the religious figures and also for lay people. We need to live. We need to have enough to eat, a place to live. And to do these things, we live in a society where our energy is exchanged with money. So in this context, it's like this. And so what happens? I mean, so how do I make a living? First of all, we need to be careful to not make a living in a way that, with awareness, that it directly creates suffering or malaise. An extreme example, for example, if I produce and sell weapons, how will they be used? To to harm people, no? If I sell drugs, something, it's negative, it's harmful. I know that it's harmful. It's 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 the responsibility of the ones who also buy it. But on my side, what am I generating? Malaise. It's very linear. Um, Same thing with alcohol or any product. I think of a friend, for example. He he makes food on an industrial level, and one of his struggles is that he's trying to change the direction um, of the food, because he'd like to create healthier food, but in a market that he sells in the market that his market sells cheaper products, and so more more expensive. So healthier food is more expensive, and it wouldn't sell. A lot of fat, a lot of sugar that sells. Huh? So he's trying to maintain. He's What he's done is he's maintained the line of food that sells well, but he's also created products that are healthier for people, and also more sustainable, that it sells a little bit less. But if my objective is just to make money and I don't care about what I'm putting in people's body, I give them poison, even if it's legally, there's no problem. It would be it would be wrong livelihood. It would be considered the wrong livelihood. If to make a living, I pollute, I create conflict, tensions in society. If I hurt nature, I know that I'm doing that, but I'm within the law. I know that I'm doing that. That's a wrong livelihood. So for most of us have a simple livelihood, a coherent livelihood. We're not doing something that necessarily is harmful. Someone's asked me, "Oh, I work for a bank, and the bank makes investments here and there, but you're not doing something directly to hurt someone to make a living." That's different. We live in a complex society. There are many aspects in everything. It's not so obvious, but it's very important to try as much as possible that what I do, the interaction I have with the world, generates an interdependence. I add, and my way of thinking, when we talk about wrong livelihood, I would add not just how I make a living, but how I also spend my money as a consumer. For example, I can get my money in a very beautiful way. I do something that is beneficial, is eco-sustainable. I, it's a good job. But then I take my money and then I invest in a fund that invests in weapons or in factories that pollute. I mean, I got my money correctly, but afterwards I use it in in a wrong way, in an incoherent way, and one of the most powerful ways that we can vote, let's say, is when we buy things as consumers. We're we're when we buy something, we're giving our approval of something or not. So let's try to obtain our resources in a with awareness and be aware consumers. Let's remember that what we do when I buy something, it doesn't just end with the object that I purchase. Naturally, I'm I'm part of the production. Um, so once I don't need it anymore, where does it end up? I'm part of that chain of production. Let's remember that it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, but for most of us, it's really, really difficult to have a life where there's no no negative interdependence um, when talking about nature, for example. But there's so much that we can do starting right away with our way of interacting with society, with the environment. And this connects us to another part that comes later, but since we're not going to see the entire text these days, we can maybe jump. It has to do with being satisfied. For example, when we talk about our livelihood and nature, if we think about society on a wider scale, the way that we as human beings consume, use up resources, what we call natural resources, the way we use up the earth, is it a wrong a wrong is it wrong or right? So it's wrong because we don't take into consideration something that can last. We're looking at our immediate profits and our immediate use needs. When instead, when we relate, when we relate in general, it's not just about recycling and using sustainable products and sustainable production. We need to learn more. We need to learn more to be satisfied with what we have. Give more importance to what we need and less importance to what we want. It's an important key. Also for our own well-being and happiness. This verse that, further ahead that says, it's verse 12, it says, attachment prevents the attainment of happy states and furthermore destroys the liberation's vital force. When we have a lot of attachment and dissatisfaction, it's never enough. It doesn't matter how much we have. It really is never enough. And we always have that inner void. within. So try as much as possible to discern between what I need and what I want. Sometimes it's good to satisfy a desire. That's not a problem in and of itself. The problem is when that becomes the rule. Just just look how we relate to clothing. In these days, for example, the other day, I I put on some socks and I saw that they had holes in them. I said, okay, well, they're still working. And it's still hot, so a little bit more air. Okay. Oh, what will people think? The llama's wearing socks with holes. Do you know how much I care about that? The point is, okay, they work. Okay, but often, oh no, because this isn't like this isn't like that. Okay, sometimes I hear, oh, I've had this, I've had this for so many years. This suit for so many years, or I've had this T-shirt for so many years, as if it were something bad. Okay, great, use it up. You know, it's nice that it could last that long. So we shouldn't live in the sense of restriction and that we can't. No, but it's a feeling of 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 fullness where we thank also for what we have, rejoice for what we have. This live in abundance, but not with this mind of being enslaved by the things that we want. So back to the previous verse 6, renounce unethical forms of livelihood. So try to interact as virtuously as possible, because I don't think there's a way like that's perfect. It's very difficult. It's very complex. But each one of us, surely, we can do so much. Many, many things that we can do that together they make a difference. But sometimes we do things and then we do some things and then we get tired and it's easier to do like this. Instead, we should remember that every action brings a consequence. So when we hear where it says renounce unethical forms of livelihood and sustain yourself according to the Dharma is your spiritual path, your values. The essence of this verse is we need to interact with the world, the material world, in getting resources and in using resources in a way that is coherent with our spiritual path. I think that's very clear, right? It's not that I can say like, I can't say, oh, may all beings have happiness and its causes, and then I go there and I pollute. So it's important to try to interact with the material world in a way that is consistent with our spiritual path and our values. And just one last thing about this. Let's remember anyway that it's a process in evolution. As we go on, if we're walking correctly, we learn more things and we learn to that we can better situations and to see that there are other solutions. It's a gradual process, and we shouldn't impose on ourselves to already arrive, but so we shouldn't live this with a sense of guilt, but instead with joy. And the last thing on this, once in a while, these uh, these these paths can generate a feeling of anger towards those who don't do like this, or arrogance. I'm doing things right and you're doing it wrong. This is the right way and that's the wrong way. So I'm better than you are. You shouldn't do like this, be like this. Ideally, we should be judging choices and actions, or or ways of seeing things, and not judge people. I can say, okay, well, this way of of doing doesn't work for this, that, and this other reason. It's different than saying, you are like this or you shouldn't be like this. So I don't go against the person with arrogance, but I judge the actions. I remember once I was in Indonesia and it had rained a lot, and the beach was full of plastic, many single-use bags. And so maybe someone says, "Oh, how disgusting! Why are people using all these? They should prohibit this single-use plastic bags. It's not good. People should know better. They should do better." And then you ask local people what happens, and they explain. We're in a place where we don't have we don't that we don't have a garbage system, and the people who live here are so poor they can't afford a larger quantity of products like soap, for example, so they take a small amount home, and then they don't know what to do with the garbage once they've used it. So it's a complex situation. So your question should be, how can I help? Because the difference between me and that person are just the conditions in which we live, the education that we've had, the material conditions, resources that we have, and our awareness. So we shouldn't be pointing our finger, but instead do as much as we can to be part of a solution. Okay, let's go forward. Forsake is number 7. Forsake material possessions and adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. Sansing. I'm just going to look at the dictionary just a minute because I have a doubt here. Sang Sing was translated as material possessions. I have a doubt about that. In Italian, it was mundane possessions. Sansing means material in general. It also means like a mess, like a confused thing. So material possessions. And adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. An Arya is the translation of Pakpa in Tibetan, and Arya is Sanskrit. Have you ever heard of the Aryan race? This concept that the Nazis talked about this superior race, but actually Arya means superior. It does, but in the context of Buddhism, it's not a race, but are those who were able to eliminate their own selfishness and ignorance and are able to live in a perfect state of being with themselves and with others. This is a superior being. So what are the jewels that adorn an Arya? At the end of the text, there are a few. Patience, for example, generosity, gratitude, knowledge, listening, faith, enthusiastic effort, concentration, love, altruism. These are the jewels that we should use to adorn ourselves. The material things are there, but better if they're lived as a means and not an end. So here, where it says, sansing tamche pangche shing, means abandon that constant dynamic of wanting to get more. In other words, stop projecting your happiness on material things and project your happiness on your inner qualities. This is what Atisha's telling us. But why do we need to remember that? Because we have this predisposition to project our happiness onto material things, and that's why he's reminding us. Remember, this text comes from the 11th century in Tibet. So it's not a novelty, any of this. So it's important for us to reflect and observe and remember that there's nothing wrong or bad in material things. But poor material things are there, and how can I say? Let's use an analogy. Let's make a table of cardboard. It's possible, isn't it? Or even one of these small wooden tables. At a certain point, you put something very, very heavy on top of that table, and you increase the weight, and at a certain point the table will break. Can't support all that weight, Or if you get up on one of these tables and you start jumping up and down, it depends on how much you weigh, but at a certain point, it's just going to break. Why does the table break? Why would it break? Because the table is bad? It's ugly? Or because we have projected onto the table something that the table in its nature doesn't have these characteristics to sustain that thing. So it can't uphold all of that weight. So on material things, we put a weight on top of material things, a weight that they cannot sustain. So, and it sounds a little bad to say it like this, but we include also people with these material things. Normally, everything that is outside of us that we can call mine, my and mine. So it's not my table, it's the table I'm using, but anyway, it's a little different. We project an enormous weight onto these things. That weight is our own happiness. And then we imagine, that little poor table that's trying to, it's trying to uphold all of that weight, uphold all that weight, and then it just breaks. And we say, oh, what a bad table. Let's take another one. And the other one's not going to hold all that weight either. It's not that material things are bad, but we need to put the right amount of weight on them. What about the food? The food can nourish our body. That's the weight it can uphold. And the table, it can just place the objects of a certain weight. And another person to interact with us, the weight of interacting with us according to his own abilities and conditions. But no one, including all Buddhas put together, have the ability to sustain the weight of our happiness. Who can uphold this happiness? Our wisdom, our satisfaction, our own coherent and choices, our concentration, our gratitude, altruism, these can uphold the weight of our happiness. And even talking with with the children, they were between 9 and 13 years old during the summer camp talking together, I asked them, tell me, what are things that the more you have, the better off you are? What are the things that the more you have, just the better off you are? Money? No. And they understood right away. They they told me patience, joy, stability. Or or is there a limit? Is there a threshold that after a certain amount of patience and after too much patience, you're impatient with the amount of patience you have, or love? I mean, our inner qualities, the more we have of them, the better off we are. And they can uphold those states of well-being. And that's where we need to project our happiness as much as possible, which doesn't mean going against material things. So here where it says abandon, it doesn't mean that we should go against material things or take a vow of poverty or something. It means that we shouldn't put more weight than can be upheld by that object. I don't project onto material things what they can't sustain, especially not my own happiness. Try to distinguish between what I need and what I want, and what I like, what I would want. You can have without creating problems. If you, that's great. Let's enjoy that. There's no problem with that. For example, if you're eating something and it's something that you like to eat, enjoy it as much as possible. If you're eating, if you're eating something that you don't like, and that's all, that's all that's there, just eat it without complaining and without making a fuss. So here it says, forsake material possessions and adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. The direction that where we should be projecting, it should be on our qualities, on our wisdom, our love, our altruism, gratitude, etc. And together to uphold those, we need to have a life that's as healthy as possible, physically, socially, familial situation, environmentally healthy, as much as possible. Because often when we talk about the necessity of our inner qualities, that you can have this idea that external things don't have their place. No, we are strongly influenced by everything that we interact with. It's just that our mind interacts more than everything else. So our mind, it has the greatest amount of interaction, but we're also strongly influenced by everything around us, our environment, people around us, etc. So try to have a life that's as healthy as possible and adorn ourselves with inner qualities. And I allow myself to add something. Have you ever heard of the placebo effect? I think we all have, no? What does the placebo effect tell us? I believe that something's good for me, and the material characteristics of that thing aside, I receive a benefit from that thing, given that I think that it's a benefit, beneficial to me. I heard that that it was very common to have. It was very common for doctors to actually have a placebo for those patients that they just wanted some medicine. they wanted to feel better. They needed to take some medicine to feel better. But together with the placebo effect, there's also the nocebo effect. That's where I feel that something's bad for me, and I feel that it's actually bad for me. And sometimes I have this feeling that when you start taking care of your health with awareness, that this is bad, this is good, I can't do this, I need to do that, this is bad for me, this is bad for me, one gets paranoid and enters into that nocebo effect. I don't know if that's clear. So it's great to eat with awareness, to relate to material things with awareness, but let's be careful to not become paranoid, thinking that this is bad, this is bad, this is going to hurt me, this is bad. Don't get into that dynamic. And then that's all I have to say about that. Today, I wanted to follow the text a little bit more. So the text goes on and says, leave behind all busyness and distraction and remain in places of solitude or far from distraction. This doesn't mean that we need to take a mountain hut and be alone, far from everyone else. This means what Atisha's telling us, also adapting to times, to our modern times, the most precious resource that we have is our mind. I mean, how do we live our mind? Through our experiences, through what is life made up of? Our experiences, through our senses. But the experiences are important. At the same time, there's this continuum, our being, that goes from one experience to the next. So what happens is I go from one experience to another, and I transform as I live these experiences. And one of the most important things to choose or judge the experiences that we live is not whether that experience is pleasurable or not, but I ask ourselves how it has transformed us, how we have transformed in front of that situation. There are experiences that are unpleasant, but we familiarize ourselves with important parts of ourselves. We learn a lot. Okay, good. Or there are also experiences that are pleasurable, but we keep on nourishing some negative dynamics. There's food that's good for you that's not good for your habits, and vice versa. So Dutsi, these distractions, they're often related to entertainment. This idea of nourishing a state where one lets oneself go, entertains something that just it can also just be like a kind of pastime, and it doesn't nourish the inner qualities. Often it can happen. If instead it does, then it's time well spent. So life goes by really quickly. So if I'm doing something, I can't do another. For example, when I was a child, as I was studying, an important part of my studies was memorization. And in the Tibetan culture and within Buddhism, memorizing is very important. You memorize word for word entire texts, and I never liked it. I was I able? Yeah, but I really didn't like it, and so I memorized very little. When there were exams for debate, um, I was among the first, and with memorization, I was really at the bottom of the group, and I had all my reasons, all my excuses, but I just didn't like it. But to memorize well, you need to be in a context where you don't have many things in your head. You need to do only that. And in those years where I had this luxury of only having to study, those years are gone. And not having memorized as I could have done if I had had a different attitude, if I say if, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but um, the point is I didn't memorize much. So I used up the part of my time, as an excuse to not memorize. So that opportunity is gone. And it's not that I did bad things in the meantime or instead, but that opportunity is gone. Often we let beautiful opportunities pass because we're trapped in useless distractions. Distractions can be the palm of our own hand. Our distraction can be in the palm of our hand, not from a cell phone, obviously, and not liberation in the palm of your hand, as Pabonka Rinpoche wrote. It can be, by doing things that don't nourish anything in our lives in particular, and then our life is just used up. It gets used up. So here, when it says refrain, when it says leave behind all busyness and distractions, means to refrain from doing things that don't bring anything. It's important to relax, sometimes to not do anything at all, to have fun, have also a kind of ludic aspects to our lives. To create space to digest things. This is important. I'm not saying that we should live a rigid and tense life, not at all. But we need to be careful that we don't use up our lives with distractions, and that we don't take refuge in distractions either. The real problem is when I start taking refuge. For example, I don't feel well, or I feel anxiety or fear or whatever it is, and instead of facing solutions, I pick up my phone, I watch something, I do something to distract myself. The more I do it, then the less my ability for my ability to face myself and be aware of myself, know myself better, will be weaker. So the more I am taken by distractions, then the harder it is to take the reins of my hand, the reins of my life in my own hands. So we can get in this constant dynamic of looking for something to distract ourselves. We get lost. So here it says abandon distractions. It says leave behind busyness and distraction and remain in places of solitude. And here it's and it says here it makes reference to the word gompa in Tibetan. It's the same word we use, gompa. It's a place that's far from the city, where theoretically the daily distractions don't arrive. A distraction is something that takes us away from our objective, what we're there to do. So if I need to meditate, some things would be a distraction. So to live in this place free from distractions, it doesn't mean solitude in the sense of being alone, not seeing anyone, don't talk to anyone, and taking yourself away from the world. No, it means to allow yourself to have that silence, the silence from the sensory objects, so that you can just simply be. The, the the greater our dependency on external stimuli, the greater our boredom will be. And when we don't have it, then the greater our anxiety and that sense of void will be. Instead, we need to try to overcome that and just be fine with ourselves. Try to be in silence with ourselves and say, ah, what good company I am. Once I heard someone say, when you're alone and you're not and you don't feel well, then it means that you're not in good company. So our objective is to be good company for ourselves. And also when we say alone, also alone, far from distractions, and just feel that well-being that comes from within. And to be able to feel it, you need to create a certain harmony. And I just add one more thing. There are different ways that we can try to find a feeling of inner well-being. Very often we have this tendency to look for shortcuts. So the fastest, the quickest, the easiest way. So if I'm in an inner state of malaise, of anxiety, etc., are there shortcuts, substances that that would help me get rid of that feeling? Sure, even chocolate. But if I want to feel more connected to the world, are there substances that take me to a different state of consciousness? Yes. That of alternate consciousnesses. But first of all, what I see, there are very, very few people that I've met that seem to have the maturity and the strength to use something to have a certain experience and then make that a treasure and then generate it internally. Normally what happens is I want to repeat that experience. And then I just repeat that shortcut. And then I create an addiction. And I just open and close just as a side note, I don't want to get into details. I'm very against any use of drugs, so it's better if we don't talk too much about this. But in our modern world, that we have this tendency. People say, no, I won't fall into that trap, but many people do. We use whatever that substance is, often to, for recreational use, to feel good, and not use it like that for recreational and not as a means of transformation. And once a friend who did a job, a very important job with the peoples of the Andes and the Amazon, she said, in these traditions, they have teacher plants, and they say if one abuses the teacher plant, then the plant goes against you. The abuse is when you use that substance not as a tool, but as something that you're just using for your own pleasure. So what are these teacher plants? Tobacco was one, a coca plant, marijuana, and then many others that in certain cultures, in certain contexts, used in a certain way, with all respect, I think that there is a function. But when we take them out of the context and we live, and we are just used to abuse. We were born in this society where we just take. I think it's much harder to have a healthy use, let's say. So, and what happens is these quote unquote mystical experiences, these inner experiences, deep experiences, and even different states of consciousness or different connections that are self-generated they have the ability of being sustained, and they create more strength inside. Instead, something that comes from an external stimulation or from external stimuli, except for very specific exceptions, they create addiction and therefore weakness in people and not strength. Is that clear? So that's why, generally speaking, from my point of view and in my own personal choice, for anyone who comes to ask me, I'm extremely critical, and not in a good way, of any type of substance that one takes for this or that, and that alters states of existence. And all phenomena, as Lama Ganchen used to say, phenomena are cuckoo in the sense they're not good or bad in their essence. It depends on how we use them. But it's difficult to find it's difficult to use certain substances in a healthy way that help a real growth, actual growth. This is what I've seen, and unfortunately, what's happening, and I allow me to criticize. This is my own personal view. What is happening? We are taking certain traditions, taking them out of context, use substances to for spiritual shortcuts and justifying this process of entertainment, let's say, recreation in the end. We're doing something, we're using some kind of recreation and we're justifying it, saying that we're using it for spiritual means or spiritual reasons. But from my experience, the people that I know who have taken on these paths, I've never seen anyone get better. I've seen people really hurt themselves. People who, and even people who, after intense experiences like this, they lose their light. Lama Ganchen said, if drugs brought people to have some spiritual awakening, then the world would be filled of enlightened beings, which doesn't mean that in the right context, in the right context, the specific cases that they could be beneficial. But one thing is one thing, and another thing is another thing. And especially in the spiritual context, in my opinion, we should not risk things. A bit like saying, all phenomena and everything that exists can be used in one way or another. Things don't have an intrinsic characteristic as being good or bad, but we have our own dynamics. We're quite conditioned and we're not able to use certain things in a healthy way. So we need to be very careful. For example, if someone drinks a lot of alcohol, what's one of the consequences? One's own emotions, one's thoughts. One doesn't have that filter of control. And for example, I'm thinking of a Lama who he used to drink a lot. He liked drinking, and there were times that he would give teachings on the throne and had his bottle of whiskey, and he would get totally drunk while teaching. And the disciples would say that it didn't happen every day, but those times where he was absolutely, absolutely drunk, that he gave his most beautiful teachings when he was totally drunk. Because if I take away my filters, and what I have inside is beautiful, then what will come out is something beautiful. This is an example to say it's not that getting drunk is negative in that sense, but they said that what he offered in those times was absolutely beautiful, and the fact that it was bad for his health was something else. But I want to say that phenomena are relative, that something is not good or bad in and of itself, but we need to know, we need to recognize our weaknesses and our strengths, and be careful along our spiritual path to remember that our strength comes mostly from within, and it's a gradual path, and shortcuts block our path. They keep us from walking. That's clear, right? Okay. So here it says to remain in places of solitude, places where we are free from distraction. So something came to my mind. There was a friend who had a little bit of addiction to some substances, and he liked, and I think that is a way also of justifying what he did. He would choose a substance in particular. He would take it like almost ritual way, and he started visualizing, and he would do practices with it. And then one day, when he had the right conditions, his wife wasn't there, he was by himself, he chose to use cocaine. So he was ready, he prepared everything. At a certain point, he sees the wall in front of him like a vision, this Dharmapala, Dorje Shuden, that said to him, "You're ruining your life. You're destroying your life." And then he said, "I'm sorry, have I already taken this or not?" "No, I haven't even taken it yet." He saw that image, and from that moment, he took everything. He threw it in the toilet, down the toilet, and he never did it again. It just came to my mind, this story. The point is that the most precious resource that we have in our lives is our own mind. It's extremely strong, but it's also delicate. Experience, like that induced experiences from strong substances that create a strong imbalance, and then it's very difficult to get back to our a balanced state, and most of us are not able to do that. And any kind of addiction creates weakness. So the conclusion about this is, I mean, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to live my life to survive, and when I have a problem, I try to solve it, and life goes on. If there's something positive, I try to enjoy it. So there's this. So when I get home at night, I watch a little TV, or I try to, if I want to, push my feelings or my any kind of anxiety under the rug. I drink something, I smoke something. I mean, everybody's free to do what they want. But another possibility is I want to live as I want to use my life to grow, to get better. I want to die a better person than the one who was born. I want to be part of a positive interdependence in this world that I live in. I want to be the boss of my own life. And I don't want to run away from difficulties or inner conflicts, because if there's an inner tension that comes out when faced, when I'm in a situation, it's because it reflects, that situation reflects something that's not in balance. And thank goodness that it can come out and be seen. If we really want to live like this, we need to be careful with the substances that we take, the way we eat as well. I said that I didn't want to get into this subject because one error that happens is thinking that what I do today ends today. What I do today, I bring it with me in this life and in my future lives, for better or worse, in the sense that what I do today conditions who I am tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and very often, even from the point of view of mental habits and physical conditions to invert certain dynamics. It takes a lot of time. So we need to respect our limits. Something that I I don't want to have I don't want to have any kind of addiction. If I see something that I like something a lot, okay, but if I start feeling that, okay, I don't have it anymore and I need it, then I say, okay, now we need to look at this situation, and I let go. Because at that point, then one is no longer in charge of one's own life. And so we need to really be careful. We need to respect our own weaknesses. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. A personal example, for example, I'm a curious person on one side. And I saw that with social media, if you give me any social media from TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is, if you leave me, like that, after 24 hours, I'll still be there, because look at everything, all the messages and everything connected, and it's a kind of single-pointed concentration, perfect samadhi, and it's actually happened to me a couple times. And from that, it actually happened one moment in particular with the YouTube shorts. And I said to myself, never again. Not because I was like trapped in that situation for a couple hours. But the problem was that the following day, when I had just a little gap of time, um, I wanted to pick up and watch those shorts again. But my life is too precious. My life is too precious to 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 give it up to that which would be just a huge distraction, and that would become a addiction for me. So, but we need to leave this space so that um, so we need to cultivate this inner strength, this inner joy, and it exists and it's absolutely beautiful. It's not easy, it's not obvious. It's possible, much more possible than what one might think. Just let's just read this last without explaining it. It says it's connected also to the previous verse. It says, refrain from idle gossip and always guard your speech. You don't need to take a vow of silence, but if you have a doubt as to whether what you have to say is beneficial or not, then be quiet, because words condition our mind. Try to just say was useful. If I say something, I want to transmit something, and out of respect for you who are listening to me, what is it that I want to say? Don't say just to say. If we want to say just to say, go out into the woods and take a walk and talk. You can talk to yourself. If somebody just wants to let it out, then go ahead. Let me put on my earphones. So, I mean, why do I need to hear what you have to say? When I came to Italy after having lived in India in a very particular context, I didn't know that people would often say things just because they wanted to talk. And I at the beginning, I really tried to interact and give advice, but then saw that they didn't actually, they just wanted to talk. They wanted to say what they had to say and not listen. Instead, we should use our speech so that it reinforces positive conditionings. Like it can also direct our mind positively. So now it's time for our dedications, and we stop here for lunch.
Drove munsela taktu negyur che kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela long che ching sada lamge yente rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyur toba sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Nintzen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingilo kuncho sumki ngodrubotsol kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Omahun tembalame sangye rinpoche, gyobalame tamche rinpoche, trembalame gendu rinpoche, kyamne kuncho sumla chepabe. Buon appetito.
Have a good lunch. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you at 3 o'clock.